Hey, hey, we're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to give everyone a minute here to join. We've already got a question in the queue we're excited to answer, so we'll be back. Thanks for joining.
We are a pretty unique group because we have deep technical knowledge and we have a lot of broad business knowledge. And our approach is to try to bring those things together.
There's like the HR talent experience team, and then there's the IT team, and they're always butting heads like this. Prime for siloed people, cliques, and people talking around each other, and there being rumors, so it doesn't feel like a cohesive team a lot of the time.
The team that's focused solely on traditional IT is not positioned well to help with how technology could be more strategically used in the business, right? They care about desktop support and making sure that the network is secure.
Giving them a tool doesn't make someone successful. Being able to use that tool to solve a business problem is what makes them successful.
Where we tend to focus is kind of that layer above, where we try to take all of those technology and those tools that you have as an organization and help you leverage them at that business user level so that you're effectively accomplishing your mission in the most efficient way possible.
Because you want every employee, from a person who's managing an office all the way to somebody out in the field or even executive level, you want all of them to be working together.
How do we optimize them? How do we bring them into a technology world where it can do things for us instead of relying on a manual process?
What I care about is that you have the right tool for the job. And so to that end, we're gonna evaluate that and tell you, no, don't do it with that tool. If you're able to use technology more effectively, the people that are supposed to be focused on the mission of the organization can actually do more missional things because the tech is handling the rest.
Having a successful outcome of the project, there's no question that we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. We set ourselves up as an organization that is our focus, that's our guiding light, and so it pervades everything we do. Bulb Digital helps organizations transform their business using technology.
We help businesses use technology better so that their people work better together.
All right, that's quite the lead-in.
Yeah.
That's our video about who we are and what we do and what we're passionate about. So thanks for joining. This is our office hours event, and we hold this every Wednesday, or the first Wednesday, I should say, first Wednesday of every month. And yeah, we're really here to just take questions and answer anything that you're struggling with or a challenge that's coming up in your organization, all on the topic of modernizing your workplace. So if we haven't met, I'm Emma, and I'm joined here by Matt. I see some familiar faces in the crowd. Hello to a few of you that we know well, so thanks for joining. We do already have one question in the queue, so I think we'll start there. But as we go, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and put a chat in, or put your question in the YouTube chat. And if you're on Teams, feel free to use the chat function there. And on Teams, we do have a little bit more ability to talk with you because we can take you off mute and have a conversation.
Yep.
So that's kind of all the housekeeping things I think I need to get through. Let's start with this first question. This was submitted by Stuart on Labor Day, but he was in the UK, so it was not Labor Day where he was.
Yeah.
His question was to do with one of our recent YouTube videos. So he says, I followed the how-to auto-increment document reference numbers from Power Automate guide by Matt Kahn. Shout out to Matt. Different Matt than the one I'm sitting with. It was exactly what I was looking for. However, I have an issue because it only runs under the user who created the flow. I am sure I am missing something, but I'm not sure what. Any advice would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, so you're not missing anything to start with. The way that the video was outlined, that's how it's going to work. So anytime you create a flow that is triggered automatically, it's not going to run in the context of the user that made the change, for example. It's going to be run in the context of the user who created the connection. Technically, it's not the one that created the flow, but that's most of the time that's the case because the person who created the flow creates the connection, and so that's the connection. You aren't really clear about what the problem is with that, but I'm going to assume that the problem is that you don't like the fact that maybe Emma creates a document, and then I created the flow, so then I'm the one that shows up as auto-incrementing or changing that number. And so then, it's my account that's shown editing it. So if that is the problem, there's really two solutions. The first solution is to use what's called a service account. So that would be to create a regular user account that is used in the way of a service account, meaning you don't log into that account on a regular basis. Then you would create the connection in the context of that user, and then basically assign that to that flow. So now the flow is going to run in the context of that service account. And then when that change happens, it'll show as coming from the service account, not from the user who created the flow. So that is one, and that's a very common, very easy, simple way to go about it. It has some knock-on effects. You need to purchase an extra license and a user, and manage that user and secure that user. All of these good things, but it's relatively easy to do from a programming perspective and from a development perspective. The other option is one that's a little bit more complicated, but has a number of benefits if you want to go about using that, and that would be to use what's called validate update list item. So there's a way for you to use a REST API. So today in the flow, you're just using standard connectors, which is really easy to use again, but again, it has these limitations. There is a REST API called validate update list item, which I can post a link in chat for what this is, but basically it allows you to do what are called system updates. You can do all sorts of things. So when you make a change using this particular method, it doesn't make a version number. It doesn't require it doesn't care whether or not the document is locked or checked in. It's just going to basically, in the back end, force this change to happen. It's a very high level method. It's not well documented. It also enables you to configure who modified and who created the item or the change. So you can actually go make this change without having a record of what made the, a version that this changed. You could also say I could make it so that it said that it was Emma that made the change. So there's a lot of power with this tool, but it's way more technical in nature. So you're creating a raw API request. You're creating a raw web request out to this service. Mm-hmm. It also requires you to be a site collection admin on the SharePoint site in question. So you have to be at the highest level of permission for that site. So those are the two options. I don't think Steven's on, so we can't have a conversation about it.
Stuart.
Yeah. But those are the two options. If I had to recommend something to you from the sounds of the conversation, I would go with the service account if you can do it. If you are not, or if that's not going to work for you, definitely take that next step and look into this validate update list item method.
Cool. So we'll go ahead and post that in the chat, that link, and hopefully that will be helpful to Stuart if he is on YouTube. and it looks like we're getting some other questions. So we'll go to Kumar's question next. But I did just want to shout out, because Stuart found us, I believe, through our blogs and our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked those out, we post videos all the time, weekly.
new one today.
And yeah, new one just came out today. So if you're not subscribed, definitely go over there and check out our channel, because you may have a question that comes up from one of those, and then the idea is that you can come here to office hours and get direct help. That's kind of how we want to be available. So let's read this next question. Sounds like Kumar is embarking on a big project. So question is about custom theming. We are currently in the process of adopting Power Platform and envisioning of building at least 30 Power Apps. Woo, that's exciting. Having said that, in order to enforce branding and theming across the board, what should be the pattern that we need to practice? And he has a couple extra things here. We don't want to simply copy the custom JSON objects into every single app. Are there any mechanisms of loading the JSON object during app on start? Very curious to know your recommendations.
Yes, this is a complicated question, unfortunately. The first thing I want to mention is, if you are asking that question because you looked at our theming video, which is a very common thing, maybe you downloaded our theme template, all of that stuff is pretty outdated at this point. If we were to do theming within a Canvas app, which is, I presume, what you're talking about, there's some new features that are, some of them are already out, some of them are coming out with the modern controls that allows you to do theming much differently and a lot easier, a little bit different. And I would definitely investigate those. To your specific question, it is possible to load the JSON up for settings from an environment variable or from a different location. But the more that you do that, the more time it takes to load, the more kind of weirdness you'll have where something gets loaded right now and then initially, and then it'll kind of change on the user midstream. So there is some, there's definitely some gotchas in that regard. The things I would recommend, again, is using modern controls. Look at how Microsoft is starting to incorporate some of that theming into their core product, and try to use those as much as you can. And
we did just write a blog about this, and they just threw that
I didn't know whether
yep.
that was launched yet, but yeah,
yep.
so
it's in there.
Michaela wrote an update that you should definitely check out as well. And if you had any questions about that, again, reach out on social. You know, if it's not clear or if there's a question about that, Michaela would love to have a conversation with you about that and answer some of that. So those are two things. The other thing I'll mention is related to a video, the video that came out today, which Mike did, which is, I would guess all of this is coming from the fact that you're using Canvas apps. And you're talking about creating 30 Canvas apps potentially. We would strongly recommend rethinking that concept and thinking more about model-driven apps as being your primary focus, which there's a licensing implication to that, et cetera, which we recognize, and Mike gets into that in a lot of detail on his video. The reason I say that is because it's going to take a lot of work for you to keep those things consistent. It's going, you said, oh, I don't want to have to do this work to keep those things. That's kind of the nature of a Canvas app. They're not meant. They weren't from the foundation built in a way that makes that super, super, super easy. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever build a Canvas app. I just want to be really clear. The distinction of those two things should come down to, is this something that is something that someone's going to be doing a lot of data entry for and a lot of management, and I'm just going to be working on it day in, day out? Or is this something I just want to give somebody as an end user, easy, quick access, where the UI is really important to be in a very specific way and make it really simple for the user to go use it, right? And oftentimes when we're doing development, there's actually two levels. There's a model-driven app that's the core behind it, which is easy to develop and manage and maintain and do administrative tasks. And then there's a Canvas app that's used for like data capture from external parties, right? So there's like a customer side many times and an internal user side, right? And by customer, I'm using that very loosely. So for example, if I'm talking about a finance app that manages expense reports, for example, the Canvas app would be for end employees potentially to submit their expenses, whereas the model-driven app would be for the finance team to report, manage, like interact with those things that get submitted. As a rough example. So I don't know if that helps. Obviously, you're on Teams, Kumar. You can definitely come off and chat if you wanted to. Come off mute and talk about that more. But hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at there and how that might happen. So that's it.
I'll give him a chance if he wants to come off mute. We did get a couple of other questions too, so we can dive into those. One from Craig, I think, is the next one that came in, and then we'll go over to Brandon on YouTube. So Craig writes, something he's working on is the migration of users from an old domain to a new domain in Microsoft 365. Both are recognized by the same tenant. That sounds like a big initiative and undertaking. So no big question there, I don't think, from Craig, but just answering my question of what are you working on this fall?
So not necessarily a question. Okay.
Unless you have some hot topics that you want to share.
I don't know that I have a hot take on it, but that's definitely, that's a challenge. I presume you're talking about email domain and moving from one to the other. It's just tedious more than anything else, and a lot of communication with end users. Making sure that they understand what's going on with it. We moved a long while ago. We actually had a completely different name for the organization before we were Bulb Digital, and we had to do the same kind of thing. So
he just says advice welcome for moving mailboxes and SharePoint site. There was one thing I remember, and maybe they've changed this. Isn't it true you can only change your domain once within
so it depends on
SharePoint?
You're thinking about the actual URL for SharePoint.com.
Yeah.
I think what he's talking about is adding a different domain. So we have Bear Bulb Co. and we have Bulb Digital. Yeah. So at all of our original was all Bear Bulb Co. We moved it to bulb.digital, which for us was pretty easy. We just added the domain and then switched everybody over to the primary domain. So rebranding, So you talk about moving mailboxes and SharePoint sites. I'm not sure if you're talking really about what I'm saying, Craig, which is creating a new domain. You shouldn't have to move SharePoint sites, and you shouldn't have to move mailboxes. You should be able to add the extra domain to everybody's mailbox to say that mailbox works with both domains, and then add in an alias. Great. And then making that the primary. That's the big key, so that people start using the new mailbox for everything. That's the hard part. But it's just a setting on in the mailbox, etc., to change which one you want. Which you can do. I would have to look it up because it's been a while since I've done it. But you can. So his statement was, but users want to log in under the new domain, and I 100% agree. You can change a UPN, so you can change the UPN of all the users without having to recreate the account. You can just basically say, hey, this is not the one anymore. This is the new one, and it should just work.
Cool. UPN, I'll check that out. Awesome.
One other, I do want to make a statement about that though. When you change the UPN, it can have a lot of impact on third parties. So, for example, we have challenges with some of our customers where maybe they're working with a user that they invited into their tenant as a guest user, but then they did exactly what you're doing, renamed their domain. That connection to their tenant is broken now because their tenant only knows about the old UPN, and your change can't reach into their tenant and make a change. So oftentimes you'll want to communicate with those third parties and say, get rid of all of our existing users, and they'll add them back in and give them the right thing. UPN is user principal name, I think is the abbreviation for it. It's basically
I just looked it up on Google.
It's user principal name. Yeah. You're basically saying this is the primary, right? So you added an alias, etc. If I can find some documentation, I'll send you a link. But it should be something you can look up and do without too big of a problem. Like I said, we did it for us. You don't have to create new accounts, and I would recommend avoiding that at all costs because that's just a lot of work.
So what is it again?
User principal name.
Principal name. Okay. Learned something new. I learned that as well. All right. Sounds like we were able to answer the question on the custom theming, so that one is closed.
Cool.
Let's go over to Brandon. Thank you for your very nice compliments on YouTube. Good to meet you. I'm going to start at the top. I'm reading from kind of across the room here, but here we go. I've built an let's see. Mitch is going to make it a little bit bigger
is
for
messing
me.
us up. He's covering up what we're trying to read.
I feel like I'm in a doctor's office where I'm trying to read.
Yeah,
from
we're
far
getting
away.
we're getting an eye exam
Okay.
at M&IR right now.
I've built an ingestion process in a SQL database, which normalizes all the dimension data from multiple sources, mostly on on-prem app databases. The process uses DIM tables for source, entity, and column, and value. The resulting table is unpivoted and contains value ID and a bunch of different other variables, all entities. Using this as a source to build up entity DIM tables in Dataverse, I need to build a mapping process which allows data owners to map their system's ID to the universal identifier. So here's the actual question. Yes, should I create and store dimension tables in Dataverse using Automate to transform and update each DIM table? Should I keep them in SQL and bring them in whole? Note that I am in full control of our data in the company. Transformation from Alteryx, SQL, database, ETL.
World of Power Platform.
Okay,
Yeah.
couldn't read that part.
So, I really want to ask the first question, which is, why are we dealing with both SQL and Dataverse? There are reasons to do it, but it's not clear to me in what you've described as to why you would want to do that. If you're going to use Power Platform, I would always encourage you to start in Power Platform, keep it in Power Platform, and use Power Platform for all of those things. Staging in SQL due to existing DBA resources. Yeah, that's the challenge. Yeah. It just makes it really difficult.
Just for our team's listeners,
sorry.
Brandon's responding, staging in SQL is due to existing DBA resources, and Power Platform is new to all. So he's trying to bridge that transition.
That's tough. So that's my first statement is that's not a good reason to use it just in SQL. Not meaning that you can't, but it's not a very good reason. If you're already going to go into Power Platform, doing it in Power Platform makes it really doing this transition between the two in ingestion, so that you're bringing tables in. Because I also think that you're not doing virtual tables, which I don't know if you've looked at that, but virtual tables, if you had a reason to keep it in SQL, so you're like, oh, I've got this existing system that has SQL data and it's all got this stuff, but I want to add some new stuff on the outside that has some extra Power Platform stuff. You could do virtual tables to bring in some SQL things, and then you can have your other data in Dataverse. That would be another piece. My stopping point is this all in table with all DIM data, essentially using stored procedures to update this table. Note that a given source has distinct views for each source entity. Yeah, again, it really comes down to, it sounds like what you're trying to do is you want to use SQL as the backend because that's what's comfortable for your DBAs and what's comfortable for your end users, or not end users, but the IT infrastructure behind the scenes. And if that's what you really want to do, using a Canvas app on the front end and just doing stuff directly in SQL is probably your best way to do it. But you lose all of the benefits of model-driven apps and like all of that stuff. But quite frankly, you're losing that anyways, because if you're trying to use DBA management techniques that are happening in SQL, but then trying to ingest the data into Dataverse, you're just making things really complicated for what you're trying to do. I don't know if that makes sense or if my statement actually represents what your real situation is. But if your real situation is we have DBAs and an IT infrastructure that knows how to deal with SQL and doing DBA stuff in SQL, and we want to make them comfortable and but still leverage some stuff in Power Platform, your best bet is to do so yes and no. Also viewing everything to this point as the system data will significantly supplement with report values and various Excel models across the business. Also viewing everything to this point as the system data will significantly supplement with report values and various Excel models. Interesting.
We've got other friends on Teams weighing in.
Yeah, Power Query.
Yeah, Power Query.
Power Query is the ingestion model that he's probably...
Hey, Matt, do you want me to invite him to the Teams meeting?
If you could, that would be great.
Yeah, yeah, Brandon, we're unable to take you off mute or even be able to talk with you on YouTube.
If Brandon wants, I'll post a link here, and then Emma, why don't you reset the room while I'm doing that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, Awesome. Yeah, Brandon's in. He's part of the exclusive team side of things. But for the record, anyone can be part of the team side. For office hours, you're able to register in advance. Just make sure you register before that first Wednesday of each month. So yes, other people are giving love over to Brandon. Props to Brandon. Awesome. So again, just resetting if you're joining, this is our office hours time where Matt and I take questions about what you're working on, any challenges or obstacles that you're running into, whether you're trying to modernize your work, whether that's highly technical, you're trying to do an initiative like we're discussing here with Brandon, or it could be as simple as I'm just trying to get people to use Teams more regularly, or how do we get off of Zoom and over into Teams, or how do we stop sending so many emails? Any of these questions are fair game. So whatever you're working on, let us know. Post your questions in chat, and we'll respond.
I have 2 updates on that I would like to share too, to make sure. I know that I posted in our community. I've talked about it with our team a little bit, but I think this is probably a good time to have that conversation while Mitch is kind of working through some stuff, and while we're waiting for any new questions. If anybody wasn't aware, I think Microsoft has done an okay job of notifying people about this change, but not about the details of it. The general channel within all of your teams is going away soon. What I mean by that is Microsoft has announced that they're allowing you to rename the general channel. That's how they've talked about it. However, what they have neglected to say is when you create a new team, you now must enter a name for the first channel when you create a team, and it cannot be the word general.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. What do you think people are going to use instead of the word
I
general?
don't know.
In case catch-all or
I've not
announcements
been able to put a lot of thought into it. I think for some of the stuff we've done, announcement makes a lot of sense. Like announcements is a good thing. But honestly, they're for probably better than 50% of the teams I create, general actually makes a decent amount of sense.
Yeah.
And it aligns with what Slack does when you create a Slack workspace or whatever. So I don't know. My biggest frustration with it, and the reason I'm mentioning it here, and I made actually a little short about it, is that Microsoft and a lot of other people really talk a lot about this benefit that their marketing spin on it is we have responded to user feedback. You now can rename the general channel, and you think, yeah, because that's what I thought. I was like, this is amazing. I've been wanting to rename the general channel forever.
Yeah, because I was going to say, all of us want to just be able to customize things more. So
correct.
Yeah.
However, when I realized that, number one, if you rename the general channel, you can't rename it back to general. And then you can't, if you create a new team, I have to choose a name, but that name can't be general. I was like,
a new channel,
what
you're saying.
Not a new team. Yeah, a new team.
A new team within, yes. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, I don't understand how this
That's
is your resolution to it.
That's going to cause a lot of confusion for people. Do you think people will just keep it general, not mess with it? And
I mean, for existing teams, I think there's going to be people who change it, but you should only change it if you want to, because you can't change it back. The real problem is what happens with new teams. Like, I don't know what you're going to do the first time you have to make a project team now, because...
Yeah, I probably will use some of those, and Tanya was asking the question of what word to use. I'd probably use announcements as my first topic. Yeah, or catch-all. I don't know, catch-all makes, but that's not great.
That's
I'm gonna have to think about it. Someone else's Craig's putting water cooler.
Yeah, water cooler.
Yeah, it would really depend on the structure of what the project is and that sort of thing, but it is frustrating that you wouldn't be able to just use the word general if you wanted to.
It makes no sense to me.
That's
it makes absolutely no sense to me why they blocked that particular word. I actually, it's not true. I think I know why, and I think it is because of the education space. So if you really want to get into my conspiracy theory, there's a bunch of features that are specific to the general channel that are built for education, for when you create a team that's related to a classroom that protects certain people, and it works differently than every other situation. Yeah. And because of that work, they said, well, I can't just rename general because it's used for all this other stuff, and that's going to be a lot of work. But what I can do is just allow you to make a different one. But if I do that, I'm not going to let you use the general one, because then it'll create confusion, because now you can't change there's this confusion about what's really going on. Right. That's my guess. Truly, that's just a random guess. I think it's based in some facts, but
okay. we'll wrap up this conversation. But the last thing I want to say, I just asked Copilot what I should name it. What are some names, alternate names you could use for general in Microsoft Teams? Main, central, hub, core, primary, common, lobby, headquarters, commons, main hall, gathering. Those are some other topics. Thanks, Copilot.
Miscellaneous.
All right. Miscellaneous.
Tanya said.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So let's pause on this topic. I know you've got another one you want to get into, but let's go back to Brandon because I think he's here.
Yeah, if you want to come off mute, Brandon, you can.
Yes. Okay. I'm simultaneously replacing.
Oh, right on.
All right.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So
I'm here. I exist.
Yeah, if you could just summarize like what's going on just a little bit more to help us out a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, in a nutshell, you guys have already kind of read the bullet points, but so I come from a like low code, no code background. Alteryx kind of jumping me into the IT side.
Okay.
And I've been here for the last couple of years at another company, and I built up our like kind of data modeling or a data model and all reporting that stems from that across the business. So now I'm ready to blow it up and replace it with Power Platform. And essentially, we have a lot of different applications where we're in an industry where our employees were given the latitude to kind of just pick and choose what they wanted with very little integration anywhere. So I started some kind of MDM initiatives. We have like a master list for some of our key entities, and I've got some other stuff that's kind of tucked away, but really it's just grown into a huge headache. We've got reporting data sets that are being used as inputs to other reporting data sets and so forth and so on. So essentially, we've got a DBA in-house who, while this like great DBA, is not necessarily focused on kind of leveling up our reporting game and our digital transformation, if you would. So ChatGPT and I have really jumped off the deep end, and I built up this kind of ingestion tool with the thought behind it being, okay, we have a number of different application databases. We've got a number of different public sources of data. Essentially, I'm going to treat all of these as data that either A, we cannot change, or B, in order to change it and have it be shown on whatever dashboard you're looking at or whatever, you're just going to have to wait till it refreshes. So it's with all of that, like it's under that broad umbrella that I'm starting the Dataverse journey. So there's a number of variants of names or other types of groupings or supplemental columns or whatever it might be that can now live in Dataverse. And then not to mention all the benefits of delivering the apps that give users control over this data.
But you're not focused on that. You're not focused on that that end of it, right? Like right now, you're really more about the reporting. You're not talking about updating the data as much as because that's where I was stuck on it. Is I was thinking you're talking about most of it being you want to be able to create new apps, but it sounds like a lot of your core problem right now is I want to level up our reporting game and pull this data that I've currently got in a bunch of different SQL places into a spot where I can create a common data set that will work for everything, kind of thing. Is that?
Yeah. And one of the huge benefits, or one of the big things I've got going for me at this stage, is I've done all of the reporting across the entire business for the last few years. So I know all the entity definitions. Like I know what people need. I know how to join them. I'm totally good at that. So essentially I went and grabbed every column that I could imagine with every value that I could imagine with system identifiers, stacked them on top of each other. And now I'm ready to go and build up these individual dimension tables for each given business entity, which I've got 10 or 11. And I'm not sure. So I've got this real tall, skinny, like optimized for performance data set. And I went to go build flows. I'm like, dude, I don't know what's the most efficient way. Should I just keep it in SQL? What do I do?
So how much data are we talking about?
Not a ridiculous amount. I mean, we're sub million. For dimension data.
So, I mean, I would actually think about, like, I don't know that Dataverse is the right choice for you. I think you might want to look at data lakes, lake houses, like all of this fancy data warehousing stuff instead for for the particular purpose that you're dealing with right now, right? Like the reporting piece of it, you know, you're gonna even in a model, even in a Dataverse environment, a Power Platform environment, you're gonna be in a situation where you end up with a bunch of different data sets that you want to bring in. Using a data lake or something similar you can ingest all this data into a common place that's separate from where you're doing your application development will do a bunch of things where you can like disconnect things. So by doing that, you could then move a particular app from SQL, for example, into Power Platform and start doing the CRUD and all of the stuff within Power Platform without having to maybe carry all of that data forward, right? Let's maybe this is a transactional system app that deals with something. You want the old data to keep reporting, but you want the new data for this new stuff. Maybe because you've ingested this data into a data lake or a data warehouse, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different terms for it. Like, you know, I don't know which one would be best given your particular data set. That might be a better way to go because the purpose of Power Platform and Dataverse in this case, it's not meant for data warehousing stuff. It's meant for low code, no code editing and managing, and like that's what its main purpose is.
Right.
The exporting that data out, if you want to do reporting across a bunch of apps and across a bunch of stuff, you would bring it into a reporting tool like a data lake, etc. That would be a better place for it. Specific to your question, so I just told you to do something different than what you've already on, which I don't, I'm not going to propose that I know enough to know for sure that that's what you should do, but I can tell you, I'm pretty confident you probably should look into that. Your specific question is, well, now I want to create all of these dimensions, and your question is, I've got all of these different GUIDs and these different IDs. Is that the core of your question, is what you should do related to that?
Yeah, essentially, and I think it's in line with kind of the point that you were just making there, and not knowing what the right path is, if you would. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's a lookup table. I'm going to get my GUID or whatever, and then I'm going to have columns for each source system or place that I would have an identifier for that, or alternatively, you know, stack all my system identifiers and put the, you know, real entity ID next to it. But
yeah, I would lean towards stacking them and putting a separate one next to it. But I think if you told me that you wanted to eventually be able to do CRUD stuff, you know, editing, updating, real app, you know, updates, I would say unless those apps are actually closely related, and they should be related, I would, you know, really those should be two separate schemas. And in the case of Dataverse, probably potentially two different environments and two different, you know, sets of Dataverse tables. You know, the question I have is, I would be asking myself, I would be asking you, is the reason you're bringing that data together only for reporting, or is it also so there's two different ways, at least two different ways, the reasons you could be doing this. One is, hey, I've got all of this data in a couple different places, and I want to be able to report at it from an enterprise level. It makes sense to have them separate other places because for security, et cetera, but I want to bring them together for reporting. That's one reason. And the other reason could be, well, this person developed this app, this person developed this app, this person developed this app, but really it's all part of the same business process, and so they should really belong to the same application. And if you're in that model, then yeah, I mean, stack them, do what you're talking about in Dataverse so that in the future you can update it. But if it's just for reporting, if that's the reason you're bringing it together is to make the reporting easier, you know, what you're gonna want to do eventually is have a separate system that'll do the CRUD, and this will just be a data lake, data warehouse, you know, whatever you want to call it, a read-only like view of the data to make it easy for you to report on.
Yeah,
that's a big concept. And I know we're probably getting close. Can't see there it is. The time. We still got a little bit of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And candidly, I have thought about all of those things, and I think really what it boils down to here is we don't have the need, and I'm not storing a significant amount of data that's not already stored in an AppDB.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm essentially just slicing and dicing, defining relationships, aggregating, etc., within Alteryx today, and or relying on the DBA or other folks, third parties that are familiar with their given databases to generate views or tables that have data in the format that I need it. And so given that kind of division of resources there, my primary objective is always how can I make sure that I build those relationships correctly, and then have my analysts develop the visuals and everything. So I think to that end, and me not having the technical experience and spending the last 2 months building 5 stored procedures that are very well done, I am now kind of at this place of like, okay, well, I've got the data that is what it is. That's going to, and I'm speaking specifically around like fax data, that's going to live in our application databases, available to me in these SQL tables or wherever. And I really need to just put a magnifying glass to master data management, right? So I'm thinking that this we'll call what's living in the databases right now 60% of what's necessary from a dimension perspective as it relates to all of our reporting tools, and the remaining 40% will now live in Dataverse instead of in various workflows in various Excel files, so forth and so on. And it's lastly worth noting, there's like 2 people out of 200 that are going to be developing anything in Power Platform aside from myself and my team. So, I'm not. Baby steps, I think.
So before Matt gives any more comments on that, I do want to mention, Brandon, I don't know if you're aware, you may have seen some things about it, but we do have a digital community called The Workplace where we troubleshoot this kind of thing with different people across a lot of different industries, but folks who are kind of these early adopters or these champions at their organizations, which it sounds like you very much are, of trying to use these tools to really modernize their workplace and get work done faster, more productive. So anyway, I want to post a link there. Maybe Olivia or Mitch can throw one in about the workplace, because I think that's a really great way to have these conversations while still being able to kind of be in control of the work and not necessarily hire us to do the project. But I just wanted to post that as an option. I know there's a couple folks joining here who are in our community and post questions often. One thing that Matt just brought up about Microsoft changing that general channel name, that's something that we post about. So you can kind of be ahead of the curve. You can be seeing what we're calling out as important changes, but also troubleshooting these types of things. So that might be a cool option for you as well.
No, it's a great resource. Thank you.
More comments on
I think my only other comment is, I do think if you're bringing in dimension information from all of those systems into, I think I'm even getting a little bit more understanding of what you're talking about, which is bringing those things in so that you have them in the Power Platform environment, so you can use the same ones. Definitely having like a separate column that would allow you to have the system where it originated from and the key that originated from that other system, I think will be very helpful. The other thing I would say is that rather than doing ingestion and all of that, I don't know what type of connection you have between the two. I don't know what we want to set up. You could also set up a virtual table that would be able to do some of that stuff as well. But it sounds like you've already got the ingestion tools down, like you're already ingesting stuff. I do think that that's probably your best bet if you're really having dimensions that are going to come from multiple systems and be surfaced in the Power Platform as a single dimension that people would be able to pick from or use how they need. So I think you're going down the right path, I think, is what it boils down to. Really good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate all the resources and everything. Like I said, I watched a number of your videos and just so happened I was researching Fabric a little bit deeper today. And saw y'all were live. So
perfect.
Very glad we had this opportunity to connect.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And I did post this in the chat, but for everyone else that's listening, that question was awesome and definitely technical, which is great. Matt loves those, and it's a fun conversation when we can help people kind of think through their own problem, but don't feel like you have to ask something super technical. Maybe you are more in the low-code, no-code space, or more on the communication or even HR side where you're just trying to get people connected using these tools. So anything's fair game as far as, how do we get work done together? How do we create a project tracking system. We love to talk about how to use the Microsoft tools for that
Topic-based
as well.
communication,
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. So kind of in that same vein, I don't think we have any other live questions we haven't gotten to, but I will look through in just a minute. But I wanted to mention that we launched our TCR course, which is a fun abbreviation. But really what it stands for is Total Communication Reset. So if you're someone who's not 100% satisfied with the way people are communicating at your business, this course we designed for those people. If you kind of have that feeling of I'm using Teams or I'm using these things, but I don't think I'm really doing everything right, we put together short 5-minute videos for 4 weeks. So you just watch 5 minutes each day. That was a big thing, I think, for all of us, because we realized when we learn new things, we don't have a ton of time to spend on watching videos or watching content. So that's the structure, and if you're interested in signing up for that, we'll post a link in the chat. But I found courses like this are super helpful because they build one day after the other, so you can kind of start to adopt the new learnings throughout your month. It's not like an overflow of information at once. Shout out to Mitch, who's behind our mic here. He put this course together and filmed it with our team. So anyway, I just wanted to share that, because if you are feeling overwhelmed with like where to begin, this is a really great resource to get you on the right track. And we have had a couple organizations come to us and say, you know, can we get 15 people enrolled at our org so that everyone's watching and getting aligned together. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know. But it's a great first start for changing some of the ways you communicate.
Yeah, and actually, we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about that particular concept and where it goes. We got a lot of great feedback from the TCR, the Total Communication Reset. Emma and I also kind of did some work related to another offering that we've launched, which is the boot camp, and I'm going to not remember the name that it's completely there.
Yeah,
but
Teams Communication Boot Camp. Yeah.
And it basically is more for an organization rather than for an individual. And I think, you know, we're starting to work on some related to, you know, task management, project management stuff. And I think some of the things that Em and I have kind of come away with related to this is that there's a lot of organizations that think that they need project management and task management, and that's the most important thing. And often what we find is they need the basics of communication, right? They need to figure out how to not rely on email. They need to figure out how to communicate effectively. They need to figure out how to work in this modern world, and that's really where they should start. But they're so focused on the task piece of it that is where they're focused. But the reality is, so often people, if they're putting information in a central, you know, if they're doing topic-based communication and they're using a tool that does topic-based communication, all of a sudden, I don't have to manage so many tasks, so they're just getting done, right? Like, they're just happening, and I don't have to track it because people are just doing them.
Right.
And that's the world you really want to live in, which is, you know, things are just working. People are doing the work that they need to do. They're getting the work done, and they're able to move forward. So
and I think we're slowly coming to the realization, or have already come to it, that trying to implement with a team that is not communicating well an in-depth task management system. For example, with Planner, this is one thing we're going through, where we just created a guide really for it, because we realized it's so complicated to teach teams what's the right way to create a plan. If you don't have teams set up the right way, or a way that's going to encompass the right team members in different teams and different Microsoft groups, those terms can be confusing. Microsoft uses them somewhat interchangeably. But if you don't have that set up the right way and people aren't trained on how to create plans within those, then all of this effort to create plans and tasks that link to to-do are kind of for naught, because they won't link back and be living in the right places. So again, it's just about building that foundation, having everyone kind of on board with where you're moving, and then building upon that. And if you do second things first, you're just going to be, it will be a lot easier to do first things first.
You can do it. You can 100% do it. It's just not quite as effective.
Yeah.
But
So kind of on that topic, we're also working through, you know, how can we help you guys and your organizations and people that come to us all the time saying, how do I get the foundation set up and then move on to setting up really strong project management using Microsoft 365 so I don't have to pay for all these other tools? So I'm actually creating that with help of my team. And we would love your feedback specifically on this topic. If you want to kind of be a partner in us in creating this, it'd be really helpful if you fill out this form that Mitch is going to throw up there. It has a couple questions there on why is it so difficult. I think we know a lot of the reasons of why it's so difficult to use Microsoft 365 for project management, but I'm curious to get you guys' take, especially from this group, as y'all are usually the early adopters and those who are really going after using these tools. So Aaron, I see you're over on YouTube. I'd love your thoughts. We'll post that over there as well, because it looks like you're currently trying to figure out best practices for project management in this low-code world. Yeah.
We have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
I don't, or 6 minutes
Couple
left
minutes,
or whatever.
yeah.
I don't see any more questions, but I wanted to maybe have this conversation with you a minute. We've had it before a little bit. And Erin, I'm going to riff off what Erin was asking. So she's saying, I'm just patiently waiting for Loop and exploring some of the functionality you've mentioned in your podcast for project management. Project management is something our team is currently trying to figure out best practice for in the low-code world. One of the things that I know you and I have talked about, which is I think is missed with a lot of people, we use terms like project management, and we try to use that, and it covers just a ginormous swath of what people mean. And it's one of the things we talk about a little bit is like you should think a little bit about what you really mean. Do you mean task management? Do you mean process management? Do you mean project management? Those are the 3 categories that we talk about. Really, and what that really means is the project management tools that Microsoft has built, they're meant for traditional project management that is free form in a lot of ways, right? Mm-hmm. It's meant for you to say, every time I come up to a problem, I need to think about what the tasks are from that, and we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to talk about the tasks, and we're going to create a new team, and we're going to do this and do that to come up with this task list, and
an end date,
and a start date and an end date, and all of that. What a lot of people mean is they mean process management, where when this request comes in, it's like a machine. I have to do X, Y, and Z, and then it goes to the next person. They do X, Y, and Z, and then it goes to the next person. And
we do X, Y, Z.
Or every month. And it's not that you can't do those things with these tools, but that is a different concept, right? Mm-hmm. In many cases, I would go, well, you need a low-code app for that, right? Mm-hmm. Or you need you need something different than Planner and To Do, and maybe there's integration with those tools, but they're it's not the same, right?
Or you just have to approach the tools with a really different mindset.
Accept the fact that you're not the primary market for those tools. And so it's an interesting thing. And so, Aaron, I would just encourage you to think about that and do some reading. We're probably going to produce some content about that in the coming months. But, think about what you really mean when you say project management. Yeah. What are you really trying to manage? Is it really a project? Does it have a start and an end date and a thing? Is it something else?
Yeah. So beyond just the form too, I just want to throw this out there to those listening. If you are interested, because we're looking to actually connect and create some content collaboratively with some folks who are trying to figure this out at your organization. We'd love to actually network with some of you who are already trying to figure this out, or maybe leading the initiative at your organization. So if you're interested, if you want to raise your hand for that, let us know. Just reach out to us through our website, because I'd be curious to jump on a 30-minute call and just ideate some of this and create some content around it, because we have figured it out here at our company, and we're trying to bring that knowledge to other companies.
We can figure it out for other companies, but it's the way we're currently doing it is very expensive, right? And the problem is largely because Microsoft doesn't create a one way. Right. You can do lots of things with the tools. Not all of those things are the best things you should use the tool for. And so it becomes very difficult.
We have seen certain things work super successfully at certain organizations, and we're trying to prove out and kind of create a best practice map like Aaron's talking about, because otherwise there's too many tools that do too many things, and just the chaos of having to begin stops a lot of people. Yep. So we're trying to crack that nut. But if you're interested in being on the journey along with us, sign up.
Flexibility.
Yes, it really is an over-flexibility, Craig. That's a good way of putting it.
Put it.
Yeah. Okay, well, our time is winding down. We really appreciate everyone joining and just being a part of our community at Bulb Digital. We appreciate you guys leaving YouTube comments and coming to these each month. Definitely sign up for next month.
Yep.
It will be Matt and I's birthday month, October.
Will be.
All right, thanks everyone for joining. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to y'all soon.